So today, basically, something massive happened, kind of like every hour politically. So what's the metaphors that you've been using to capture such chaos?
Mine on the radio a little earlier was smorgasbord.
Oh, I wondered when someone would say smorgasbord.
Smorgasbord of news.
Not exactly sure what a smorgasbord actually is. Let's hope it is what we think it is. Laura?
Fiasco.
Oh, we've upgraded it to fiasco now.
I've said fiasco about the party.
Okay, that's a significant moment in any news story when...
Do you think?
when the F word's deployed.
Let's not have fiasco gate about the fiasco. But it was 2 weeks ago we said on the audio podcast, we said, oh, it could be Partygate. And here we are.
Yeah. I mean, I've got really into poke bowls for my lunch lately, so I'm thinking it's a bit of a poke bowl.
Into
What is a poke bowl?
It's like a Hawaiian, it's like a bowl of rice, and then you get some tuna, then you get some edamame beans, then you get some chili, then you get some crispy onions on top. And it's basically just something about it.
Fleming.
It's just a big combination of quite different things.
You're
You think, whoa, are those things going to go together? And then it's actually
Magic in the mouth.
tasty. Magic in the mouth. Okay, let's have some magic in your ears on this episode of Newscast. Hopefully it's magic.
Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.
Hello, it's Chris in the Newscast studio, feeling very humble about my jam sandwich lunch.
No, I love a dairy triangle myself. It's Laura in the same studio, but in Adam's seat. I don't know why we've done this tonight.
And it's Adam in Laura's seat in the studio. And I'm going to go in a couple of minutes because we've got a former cabinet minister coming in. And because of the COVID rules, we can't all be in the same room at the same time. But that's fine. I'll sit in Chris Mason's cupboard.
So, Laura, I think it's one of those weeks where you kind of, open up your notebook and tell us about, as you've described it, fiasco of all of this smorgasbord of
well, hang on,
edamame beans.
What are we going to take from the smorgasbord first? Should we talk about Plan B in England going into the new COVID measures first?
Okay, yeah, because if you're watching at home, obviously, or listening to the podcast, there are going to be big changes again to how people live their lives because the government is tightening restrictions on COVID in England because the Omicron variant is spreading faster than anybody thought it was going to. And obviously that matters to businesses, it matters to hospitals, it matters to how people live their lives, of course. But it has already run into pretty significant Tory resistance. There are a couple of dozen Tory MPs already on the record saying that they're going to vote against it. And it's really stirred the pot during what's already been a very awkward political moment.
And the thing they're really upset about is the introduction of COVID passes. Yes. So you'll have to show the QR code if you want to go to a nightclub or a larger venue or even an outdoor venue with lots of people at it. But you can see the government's tried to blunt some of the criticism in advance by saying it's not just 2 vaccine doses. Also, they could have gone further and said you had to be boosted to get your COVID pass. But they also said you could get a negative lateral flow test, and they're available for free from the pharmacy and are no mandatory intrusion in your life. So, and there's the sunset clause and there's the review point. So you see they're trying to reassure people, but it hasn't reassured the people who are annoyed, has it?
Because it has that kind of papers, please society thing about it, doesn't
Absolutely.
it? Which for plenty, particularly on the Conservative backbenches, just isn't British.
Yeah, that's right. So you're hearing words like draconian. There was one Tory MP even yesterday who was talking about these being socialist measures, which are of a Conservative MP of that particular flavour is just about the worst insult that you could give anyone in their kind of view.
The road to hell.
The road to hell. Yeah, it's really, really stirring things up and there's a lot of unhappiness about it. Let's be clear. Labour is very, very, very likely to come in behind the government, even though they don't like the way that the plans have been, brought together. But they have all the way through this pandemic basically backed the government. It would be pretty astonishing if they didn't next week to take the opportunity of this tricky political moment. But it is one of these things which is adding to the sense of deep, deep anger and anxiety in the Tory party about, and this is one on policy, even before we get to all the other shenanigans.
The Partygate. I'm still not comfortable calling it. I don't think it's reached Partygate yet. And also, when people say to you, like, and what's happening with the party? And you're like, do you mean the Conservative Party or the party that the Conservative Party had, the Conservative Party? You have to be quite clear which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the alleged Downing Street Christmas party on the 18th of December last year. That's now being investigated by Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary. Does that draw a line under Partygate for now? No. You can see they thought it might do for a bit.
Well, for about 5 minutes.
And there's 2 other, we've learnt today, haven't we, of 2 other parties/gatherings, as they were euphemistically called, by Michael Ellis in the Commons earlier on, the Paymaster General.
Minister,
So there's one from the 27th of November, which is into what we think was this kind of leaving thing.
Yes, we talked about this last week. A member of staff was leaving and Boris Johnson apparently toddled along, said a few words. There were a few people sitting around drinking. It's been denied that this was a party. It was more a sort of impromptu gathering. The crucial difference between that and the 18th is that I've been told by someone who was there, people were invited from outside and invites went out and there were food, games and drink.
Nibbles.
Yes, and the other one is the Department for Education.
Which they've coughed to,
they've coughed to. They've
basically
admitted
said that was a
to use
mistake.
the term.
Although they did only fess up to it after it was exposed in a newspaper. So it's not like they proactively came out and confessed. It's only when
Sure, but it does point to the distinction between, in terms of how you respond to something.
Oh, yeah,
if you say, well, you know what, actually this was a mistake, we shouldn't have done it, it kind of hoses it down, doesn't it?
Also, the senior civil servant in the Department for Education was in front of a select committee that day. So
well,
it's
there was that.
Apparently it was in the canteen and people bought their own stuff, so therefore that's not a party. Maybe people had Pokeballs.
We're back to the old...
There was something in Pokemon Go. There Pokeball. Oh, anyway.
I'll buy you all a Pokeball one day.
But the point is about all this, though, isn't it, is the political disturbance that it's creating, which is huge. Yeah. It's not really about whether there were Pokeballs or Dairy Triangles at a party.
Yes. Yeah. And as a result of this, I mean, I was always surprised when I came back to Westminster full-time at the start of this year, how many people in the Conservative Party would openly speculate to you about when Boris Johnson wasn't Prime Minister and who could take over from him. And I was really surprised that this early in his Prime Ministership...
That's the never-ending Westminster conversation.
Well, I know, but I was...
Who's the next Prime Minister?
Yeah, but as
because they all want to be it.
Well, there is that. But as a newbie, I was surprised how easy it was to get people to talk about it. But it's actually become even easier this week.
Yeah, because it's a real serious conversation now, right? So it's not frivolous leadership speculation, which you're right, politicians in all parties love and adore. They love talking about themselves. Sorry, but it's true. They love talking about their own ambitions and often very noble ambitions to try to do what they think the right thing is for the country. But the fiasco of the last few weeks has meant that this is a conversation that is now happening very overtly in the Conservative Party.
Overtly, covertly.
Yeah, very overtly, covertly, but also I think seriously. And I think it's far-fetched to consider that right now there's going to be an immediate challenge. Although one former minister said to me today he'd had 2 approaches in the last few days to put in a letter, and that's Tory code for putting a letter to the boss of the kind of shop steward for Tory MPs, Graham Brady of the 22, and that's how you trigger a leadership contest. But I'm just saying, underlining, I think to talk about something immediate is a bit far-fetched. But there are absolutely conversations about how what life after Boris Johnson might look like. And there were all sorts of sort of great metaphors whizzing around. I mean, one sort of, very well experienced MP said to me, look, stage 1 of the Tory leadership transition, where everybody agrees that the Prime Minister might be running out of road, is complete. Right. We are at stage 2, where we talk about, who, how, and when, and stage 2 often takes a very long time. So there's 2 different things there. You listen to the first half of that and you go, oh my God, imminent. Imminent. Yeah. But these conversations are happening. Now, another senior MP said to me, look, this is fixable. It can be fixed. And Boris Johnson has a chance to do this. But there's such intense pressure on him basically to sharpen up. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to open my notebook because I can't help myself. Here we go. So this is someone who backed Boris Johnson. OK, just to be clear. It's like a theme park of soft decision-making in number 10. The helter-skelter, there's the lost in space, there's the final ride, which is make the decision and if you can stick to it by the end of the ride. They all have to be shut down. We need not to have fair ground. This is the big moment when every politician has to face up to the reality of who they are. He needs to be honest about himself.
Colourful phrase maker.
Isn't it? A very colourful phrase maker who, of course, shall remain anonymous. But it was interesting. This person wanted to compare this situation, actually, to Westland and Margaret Thatcher. So, when a politician or Prime Minister has a terrible moment, they have to look themselves in the mirror and think, OK, what do I do? Do I carry on like this? Or do I actually make some tough, honest decisions about how I comport myself? Or do I need other people around me?
And making those comparisons with those affairs of the past that have defined a leadership or pointed to a kind of pivot point in a leadership. It's quite something.
It really is. That's what's so interesting about it.
Also, that theme park metaphor is quite a good one as well, because everyone loves a trip to a theme park, but actually you wouldn't want to live there. You want to go there for a thrill at the weekend,
Right.
and then the rest of the time you're at work, knuckling down.
And you're relieved when you get off the ride.
Yes.
Well,
Oh my God, it's meant to cost a minute, and you have to queue for ages for it to start, and it costs a lot of money.
It's great. But I mean, actually, someone in Cabinet said to me a couple of weeks ago, he said, we're all living on Planet Boris, but Planet Boris doesn't have any rules, right? And that is sort of but there's always a danger in political stories that people just get completely carried away with the narrative. And let's remember, and in fact, I think we've sat in this studio and said this literally before, when Boris Johnson actually quit as Foreign Secretary, and I think we were sort of saying anyone who ever says he's a busted flush and it's all over is talking...
It was you and I stood in the sunshine outside his place.
Yeah, they're talking they're talking nonsense. This is a man who's made a successful career and ended up in number 10 based on a love of flouting convention. And it would be so easy now for people to sort of just get completely carried away with this inside the Tory party and think that somehow the moment is gone. But, you know, 2 weeks ago when we had the Owen Paterson affair, we were saying, oh, could this be a tipping point? Could it be a turning point? Who's got any idea? Does it now feel as if this is quite a critical junction?
Yeah. I've got to tell you two little anecdotes from today from speaking to Cabinet Ministers on Zoom.
Oh.
So Grant Shapps. So I was putting to both Grant Shapps and to the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace about all this fiasco stuff. Yes, exactly. Staring into my laptop and talking to Grant Shapps, who said, "Oh, I don't really want to get into all of this."
They didn't.
My focus is Hitachi trains. I thought that was quite a good line because he was talking about HS2 and the contracts that have been signed for the provision of the new trains.
So not Dodgems or Helter Skelters then.
No, exactly. And then a few hours later, talking to Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, in Sweden. Because he was there meeting his Swedish opposite number. And his line, which actually I thought was even better than Hitachi trains, Chris, I've been in the Arctic Circle today. And it was -20.
So it's too cold for him to be able to read his phone.
Oh. Just stick with geopolitics and the far north.
But it is also today been a really good reminder that just being Prime Minister is not a normal job in any sense, and the people that do it are not normal people, because Boris Johnson had to announce new COVID measures because there is like a deadly virus on the rampage potentially, meanwhile dealing with all the party stuff, dealing with all these potentially backstabbing colleagues, the Electoral Commission looking into his decorating, and in the middle of it all, his wife gave birth to their second child. So just proof. And it's congratulations to them, and we wish them well for that. That's an exciting moment in anyone's life.
Yes.
But that's just a reminder that this is not a normal job, so you can't judge it by kind of any normal standards.
No. And yes, this is yet another reminder this week, isn't it, for the umpteenth time that Boris Johnson is not a normal Prime Minister. And British politics in the 2020s would yet again be likely to be turned down by any publisher looking for a political drama for just simply being too far-fetched.
Do you reckon it's time to open the studio door and bring in our newscast guest?
I think we should.
For this week. Robert Buckland, former Cabinet Minister, former Justice Secretary. So, Adam, we've got that thing, haven't we? That awkward social moment when the three of us are back in here, but we can't really have a fourth because that's a bit much in these COVID times. So
I'm going to listen to Robert Buckland, but not see him, because I'm going to go and sit in your cupboard. Give him my love.
Oh, well, thank you. Enjoy the boutique of news.
I promise I'll go in the cupboard next week. I've not had a turn in there yet.
That's true, but we've had you in your spare room at home, haven't we?
That's true. That's true. Or in a cab,
and in Cardiff,
walking around, or wherever else.
Back to taxis, all of that.
Well, thank you very much for taking my seat in the studio, and welcome, Robert Buckland. Hello.
Hello, good to see you, and thank you for being so kind.
We've done our own reshuffle. Hopefully that doesn't bring back too many bad memories for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on.
Now, you are a trained lawyer. You were the Justice Secretary for quite a long time. So a lot of your career has been about fairness, proportionality, what is just. Do you think the Plan B restrictions and COVID certificates in particular kind of tick all the boxes of fairness and proportionality?
I think that we are getting into the right place. I think that experience has taught us throughout this pandemic that being wise after the event isn't really good enough when it comes to what we need to be doing to control the proliferation of this disease. And I think we've also learned about the way in which we bring the public with us on these measures. Now, this is quite a different challenge from previous ones, where we've done well with Delta. We've got the boosters being rolled out, and the public can be perhaps forgiven for thinking, oh God, not again. Really, is this going to be lockdown territory? Are we really going to have another Christmas like the one we had before? I get all that sentiment, but at the same time, the British public now, 2 years into this, have learned as well, and they're not stupid. And already you're seeing decisions that they're making about their own lives. You're seeing even around London, you're seeing fewer people. You're just seeing people scaling back, perhaps, on their activities. And therefore, I think that they will accept, these measures, or the bulk of these measures, as proportionate. Particularly face masks, I think. Having certainty and continuity and consistency is helpful. I think stay-at-home advice and guidance, again, something people understand. COVID passes, bit of a more vexed question, I would say. But I think probably there needs to be more of a mission to explain here. And if there is new material or information that perhaps I and others haven't seen, well, bring it on.
Let's face it, though, Robert, a lot of this is made deeply, deeply difficult for the government by the fiasco that's been going on in and around Downing Street, whether that's over the parties, whether that's over Boris Johnson and his seeming inability, according to the Electoral Commission report, to get a grip on his own personal finances. Now, you know Boris Johnson well. How much do you think that the shambles that's developed in the last few weeks is damaging his brand as a leader and your party's brand and people's the view of the public? You need public goodwill at the moment to cope with the pandemic. How much damage is being done?
We do. And look, I think the tone he struck in Prime Minister's questions yesterday was actually the right one.
What, 2 weeks for an apology?
There was well, look, I think he made it very clear that he got public concern and public anger about this sort of perception that, you do as I say, not as I do, which clearly, I think he understands very well and has the capacity of undermining the messaging and confidence in the system. And, let's not dance around this. It's a problem. Of course it is.
Let's cut to the quick on all of this, because the overlapping thing around all of this, whether it be the stuff about the flat or the stuff about the parties a year ago, is the allegation that gets levelled at Boris Johnson by Labour and others. It was asked directly in the lobby briefing for Westminster reporters at lunchtime today, which is that, has the Prime Minister lied? And that's a huge word. And yet it's one now that is being frequently thrown around by the government's opponents. And that's dangerous, isn't it?
Well, look, I mean, Prime Ministers, this Prime Minister is not unique in having had allegations, thrown at them. All right, this particular set of circumstances, everybody loves something about wallpaper in Westminster. I remember Derry Irving's wallpaper when he was Lord Chancellor a few before me.
Did you ever buy any flash wallpaper?
Do you know? No, I don't. I much prefer just a plain emulsion. It's so much easier.
Magnolia.
Have you ever tried? Have you ever tried hanging wallpaper? I mean,
No, it's a nightmare.
Apart from a bit of anaglypta,
cutting around the curtain rail holders, nightmare.
Nightmare.
Yeah.
And of course, I gather that the wallpaper in Number 10 started peeling off or something. I heard that story, but we won't go there. So,
you just did.
but look, people accuse politicians, usually from another party, of being economical with the truth, lying. This is nothing new. Let's just strip away all of that. And come back to, I think, a fundamental point here, which is, government is really hard. It is exhausting. Tell me about it. I spent years doing it, not at the prime ministerial level, which is another dimension again. And I think it's really important, in those jobs that you work as smartly as you can. You use all the resources that you have at your disposal, that you trust in some of the systems of government, and that you have that sort of the capacity to govern.
So what does he need to do now then to get back on the straight and narrow?
So Boris Johnson is the greatest campaigner of our age. He's a fantastic campaigning politician, but we have got so much content as a government that we need to do. Let's actually just get on with the job of governing. Now, that might sound a bit boring. It might sound a bit mundane, a bit dull. But do you know what? I think that's what we need.
I've spoken to many, many MPs and ministers this week. They are talking privately and amongst themselves about whether Boris Johnson is still the right person to be in Number 10. You know that unless you've been going around with your fingers in your ears all week or only talking about wallpaper. Do you worry, as somebody who knows him well and as somebody who I'm sure wishes him well, you know, you didn't leave government because you fell out.
No, exactly.
Do you worry that this could turn out to be a very dangerous moment, some kind of turning point? And actually, a lot of your colleagues have been saying privately, looks like he's past the peak of his powers.
Look, you're right. I do wish him well. I know he can do this. But at the moment, I think, you know, if I was him looking in the mirror, I'd be saying, surely I can do this better. And, you know, that sort of capacity for self-improvement and, you know, sort of intelligent, sort of just a recalibration of the way things are done, I think would be a sensible move. He can do this. He can do it. But, you know, this, first of all, has to be an acknowledgement that it can be done better.
I promise we'll talk about some of the things you're working on now, which are really interesting. But do you think he could do with a different team in number 10 to help him do that?
Well, you know, we can talk about, you know, moving Scroggins and Boggins and, you know, and having new titles and where they sit. It's all nonsense, frankly.
It's about him.
Ultimately, yes, it is. But it is also about making sure that we attract the sort of calibre and team who are not frightened to say truth to power and who, you know, work as equals. You know, I'm a great believer of the Doris Kearns Goodwin School of History. You know, that wonderful book, Team of Rivals, where this hick country lawyer from Illinois becomes president. Everybody thinks he's a bit of a, you know, not up to it. He deliberately fills his cabinet with strong people who all, by the way, think they can do the job better than him. And he ends up being one of the greatest presidents of all time because he was confident enough to have strong people around him. That, I think, is a great model for how you'd run a government.
Too many yes men and women around him at the moment.
Well, I think, you know, people have to summon up the blood and not be frightened to say what they think. Do it in a professional way, of course. But that's what collective decision-making is all about. Once you've reached the collective cabinet decision, that's fine. You stick by it or you get out. But before that point, there should be plenty of opportunity for cabinet ministers or others to, you know, have that vigorous debate, probably in committee. That's probably the best place to do it. And then for cabinet to sign off on those decisions or to have further discussion if there isn't agreement.
Robert, that's now the 50th time I wish I'd read that book rather than just buying it.
Read it. It's brilliant. It's a wonderful, wonderful read.
I've started it so many times and never quite got to the end. Now, let's talk about some of the things that you're really passionate about.
Yes.
When you were in your old job, I remember one of the big things that you did towards the end of your time was actually an interview with Laura where you apologised to victims and survivors of rape. And you said that basically women had been failed by the system for years. Do you see signs that actually the failure is going to come to an end and people will stop feeling that way?
Well, look, I think, first of all, that was an important moment. And I think it was important in two ways. I think the apology was significant because it made people sit up and think, hold on, these guys are actually, you know, saying it as it is. And secondly, it was a white middle-aged bloke saying it, because the idea that these issues are just for women or young women is precisely what is wrong with this issue. Men have to talk about it. They have to own up to this issue and they have to take responsibility because for every victim there's a perpetrator. And I think that focus on, you know, those who are responsible was very much part of what I was trying to get across. Now, this week we've seen the publication of some important work by the Ministry of Justice. There's a 6-month update on the rape review that's been published this week. And although I haven't had the chance to read it yet, I think the signs are that there are some green shoots emerging. I think it's still very early days and we won't really be able to judge this, you know, for perhaps another year or so. But I think everybody's in the right place on it, and that's got to be a good thing. So, you know, I'm really proud, actually, that although I'm not where I want to be, I do think that I'm seeing a lot of my language and the words that I used in the documents that are coming out from government, even though I left 3 months ago.
Robert, I wanted to ask you about your daughter, who was diagnosed with autism, I think, when she was 10. And it's quite striking, isn't it, that fewer girls, fewer women are diagnosed than boys and men. And I just wonder what your reflections on your own personal experience are about that and and what needs to change around that?
Okay, well, she was a bit younger than that, but I still find it quite difficult to talk about the moment I heard, because part of me was relieved, frankly, that the system was recognising that there was a condition and therefore statutory services statementing and all that was going to follow. But there was also a part of me that was really, really upset, because suddenly, the life path changes. And that is something I think a lot of people who've been through the same experience really find very difficult to even talk about. So just composing myself for a moment, to sort of moving sort of the debate more widely, my strong feeling ever since that time was that there were too many families going through this. Everything was always a fight. I think now where we are is that actually diagnosis has improved and we're getting a lot more of it. But then the next question of what happens now is not being answered, particularly for young adults. So they go through the system, and very often we've got some brilliant special schools like the ones in Swindon that we have, which are fantastic. But they get to 19, 20, 21 or 25 and there's nothing. And suddenly you've got young people sitting at home doing nothing. The employment rate for autism is 2 out of 10 adults. For the general population, it's 8 out of 10. For disability generally, it's 5 out of 10. This means there are hundreds of thousands of people who are not fulfilling their potential. And it seems to me that unless we scale up research into what type of support and care works, and that sort of drive to open up potential, then we're just going to, but not just fail people, it's going to cost us all as a society a huge amount of resource. Autism isn't a disease. It shouldn't be seen as a problem. In many cases, it's a gift. And the human brain in its different permutations is an extraordinary thing. And people with autism have so much to offer. And I just think, again, that sense of wonder and potential out there is such an important part of what I'm trying to do.
And Robert, what are your hopes now for your own daughter?
What I've been encouraged by is the support that she's had in school and the things that she does and the things she's able to do with trained support. And it's just wonderful to be able to have that. But in adulthood, I'd like to think that she's going to be able to live independently with support and maybe even have a job of some sort or some activity that is meaningful for her, and that we don't sit in judgment on the quality of her life in a way that I think actually it does damage to the whole issue of autism and disability more generally. I think we can do that, but we are going to need, through the autism strategy and through the accommodation, the housing issue that is being addressed in the social care white paper, we really need to focus on that. Because, in the big social care debate, we naturally talk about elderly people, and there are many, many thousands of families, hundreds of thousands of families, like mine actually, who have that issue. But we never properly talk about the adult with disability issue and the fact that many families will have 20, 30, 40, 50 years of care responsibility for an adult with disability. And that's, I was the only one in Cabinet who talked about this, back in September. And we've just got to keep on banging the drum. And that's why I didn't vote with the government on the health bill recently, because if we don't cover the question of adults with disabilities, we're really not answering the issue.
Robert, thank you so much. This is why I love doing Newscast, because we get to stir the pot with you as a politician, and then our little family gets to hear more about your family in a kind of really sweet way. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and you got a lot out of me there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to see you and speak to you.
And thanks for tuning into this episode of Newscast. We'll be back with another one very soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.